Hey guys, it's a blustery Sunday afternoon, so I thought I would sit down and do a little bit more on my Imperial Knight Titan build. Where I'm at the moment is I'm just cleaning up parts of the legs that are going to go together, and I thought I would go into a few more specifics about the parts that we've got here now that they're all sorted out. I'd just like to preface this by saying that this is a resin build, not plastic. So some of the chunks here are quite thick and require a bit of work, a bit of sanding to get those off. So just as a health advisory, when it comes to working with resins, they can be a bit of a health hazard due to the fine dust and grit. So when I'm doing work, I'm just using a basic respirator mask there, and obviously try not to get too much dust in and around the place, so it's important to keep your workspace relatively clear of dust. So I am taking the proper precautions, but doing the vlog, I don't want to mumble too much, so just letting you know that I am taking the proper precautions. So just looking at some of the parts that we've got here initially to start with, two sections of the legs which have been cleaned up. Basically the tools that I'm using to clean up the extra flashing. The main thing is the clippers, obviously to clip the large chunks off. Now the thing with resin is it's a lot more brittle than plastic, so you can't clip too close to the actual material, otherwise you risk cracking close up. So if I were to take the clippers and clip right at the edge, you could end up with fractures, or this sole section could just break off. So the clippers are just used to just trim around a little bit there, and then the trusty hobby knife. I like to keep a nice sharp blade on there, just in terms of making a nice clean cut, and it saves you a lot of work and effort. I do keep a slightly blunter hobby knife, just for scraping and keeping a decent edge on that just helps a little bit. But a useful tool is also the Games Workshop scraper, which can be used to get in around various bits and pieces, just to get rid of any extra moulding and flashing. Probably more useful on a plastic build where you were using plastic glue, because the plastic glue would sort of weld together and you could shave things away. The resin, again, being a little more brittle, don't necessarily want to shave away too much or be too rough with it. Also a couple of mixes of sandpaper, always useful. Just pick these up from Canadian Tire. Some very fine grit just to buff things up, and just like your regular grit. So once the areas have been cleaned up for the most part, you can see that you can still see a little bit of the leftover waste there. So what I will probably do, once the parts are assembled and glued, is I will get some of the liquid green stuff, which is like a liquid filler, and just use the applicator to put that in the gap, let it sit for a little while, and you can just sand it right down, and then these gaps you won't even notice. As far as it goes, the moulding is quite good on this. Full disclosure, this is not a first party product. This is a recast. I wanted to try out a slightly cheaper version before putting proper money into the plastic mould. Could argue that that's not all above board, but honestly I would rather try this out with a cheaper build first, and then when I've got a handle on it, then fork out for the full plastic kit. So with the resin casting and the recast, there's a few little issues that pop up. This seems to be a pretty good quality. I'm pretty happy with it. But on a piece like the tabard here, which hangs down underneath the waist, you can see that there's a little near hole in there, and that's just where the resin hasn't quite set, or has had an air bubble in a very thin piece. One thing with resin too is that if it gets warm, it becomes bendable, pliable. So this one is actually supposed to be curved like this, but if you really wanted, you could heat it up and just lay it flat if you wanted. But again, what I'm going to do to fill up these little holes is I'm going to get the liquid green stuff, just give it a very thin coat, probably on the back, and this will be obscured anyway during the painting process. So that's the basic parts there. What I'll do next is I will do a brief rundown on the parts, and you can see how they're going to fit together roughly. Alright, moving on to looking at the parts. First up, we have the base here, the large oval base. What I like about this is that it is going to give you plenty of size and scope to make a really nice scenic base to go along with the theme of your night. What I've done in previous builds to keep things themed, for example with this Orc Death Dread, I've just put the corpse of a space marine there with the Dread hulking over it, and I'll probably do something fairly similar on the large oval base, just have it nice and themed. The problem which seems to be with this specific model is that the legs, which are going to form the nice solid base, aren't particularly posable. This is an upside and a downside really. The upside is it makes for a nice solid base. You can't really mess it up, especially because there's a whole lot of pistons. But the downside is you can't really get it into a lot of different poses without doing some work to it. So if you wanted to have the Night Titan striding forward or stepping on something, it's going to require a bit of work. But let me show you roughly how this is going to go together. So as I said before, this is one of the basic leg structures. This hasn't been glued yet, but this is all essentially just two solid pieces which are going to be glued together, and you can see that you've got pistons involved, gears. Pretty nice. It's going to be pretty good looking, I think. The slots in the front here are going to be for the greaves, the leg armor. Those I'm going to put on later, which a lot of people tend to do, because the main skeletal structure of this is going to be a very metallic structure, probably a bit dirtied up, oily, bit of weathering, that sort of thing. The greaves are going to have whatever colour scheme. I'll go into that in a little bit. But they are essentially just going to cover the legs as armour. Now the way this has been designed is it is going to come together in a very specific way. So here we have these base foot plates, and the way these are designed is set up so that they are going to line up in one specific way. If you line it up like this, you can see that the ball joint is sitting nice and flat. If you try to line it up another way, you would end up with gaps. So it's really set up just to fit the one way. And as you can see, you've got the main pistons here, and then you've got extra pistons which will, once they're cleaned up, they will be connecting. I don't know if this one specifically goes in here, but they will go in and lock all of that in place. So that's all going to be fairly static. There's not going to be a lot of movement in there. So the legs will be splayed out in the static pose. Then you have the hip assembly, and this is just going to, when I can get it right, lock in together. No, again, no movement, no ball joints or anything like that on the hips. This flashing here is all going to come off. You have the hex section here, and that's going to slot in. And again, that's all going to hold together in a basic pose. The next part that you're going to have is a base plate which goes over the top, which leads into the torso. That's the part where you're going to be able to do a little bit more work, a bit of magnetizing, all of that sort of thing. So that's going to be, I think, where the most fun of the build is going to be. We have a crotch plate here, and it's got a mixture of rivets and flat surfaces, so you'd be able to do freehand work if you wanted. You can get decals for it to give it the display that you want. And again, as I was showing before, the tabard that hangs down from the crotch, again, perfect for some freehand work, painting, or decals again if you want. The feet, these are nice and solid. These are good solid base, and that's where the pistons are going to slide in on there. It just gives it a lot of little detail, and it's going to be very fun for weathering, I think, getting the grimy used look for the Night Titan. I think it's going to be pretty good. It's a bunch of hoses. These will sort of slot in on the legs. Undecided yet as to what to do with these. I think I'm just going to do a straight assembly for these ones. I don't think it's going to be worth making them removable. I don't think we're going to face too many problems of parts breaking off at this stage. And again, we have the pistons. These are going to be good again for detail. Get the sliding pistons, clean all of this up, give it a nice look like it's been used. And some more two-part pistons that go in towards the back. You can see you've got the little sort of cog areas. I do like the detail that has gone into this. Here's just part of the back piece with the Adeptus Mechanicus symbol there, the skull and the cog. Again, these are going to lend themselves well to busying up with different shades of metal and copper, griming them up a little bit with some washes and dry brushing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting to the next part. Like I said, I've made a start on the leg part already. Just need to clean some of that up. But again, lots of detail on there. It looks like it could be part of a working machine, and that's always the fun part with a bit of sci-fi. So there we go. Hopefully the next part will be some more assembly on there, and maybe we'll talk about a little bit about the background and what I'm looking at with my colour scheme. I did mention that briefly earlier. So yeah, stay tuned. Alright, just another quick update. I've just been doing some more cleaning up of the leg pieces. So the two main leg pieces are done. I'm waiting on another bottle of super glue with a brush before I glue these together. A brush is going to be really handy to get around all of the different ridges. The nozzle applicator might just be a little bit too mushy, so some less viscous super glue might do the trick. And also, given that this is resin and super glue is going to make it stick immediately. I'm going to have nerves of steel to get everything aligned and down, because there's not a lot of give if you mess it up going in. But that's the plan. I was just going to talk a little bit about what my plans are for the colour scheme and some of the background behind the model itself and the fluff for the model. If you're not familiar with any of the Warhammer 40,000 models or backgrounds or anything like that, it's quite compelling. It's not as immediately recognizable as, say, Star Wars or Star Trek, but if you're British, or if you are from the colonies, or you're of a certain age, then you will have heard of Warhammer 40,000, and it's very iconic. Most people could, will be able to look at a Space Marine and say, oh, that's a Warhammer Space Marine. And the Titans are part of that. One of the things that are so compelling about the background story for Warhammer is the large-scale battles and the immense war machines that operate on the battlefields. And the Knight Titan represents the smallest of the Titan class. This is a one-pilot machine, where the pilot and the machine are essentially mentally joined. You have the pilot is hardwired into the machine and controls the machine, but there are also aspects of the machine's spirit, as they call it, which can sort of influence or infiltrate the consciousness of the pilot. So you get these princeps, they're called, that take on certain characteristics of their machines. Artificial intelligence, as we're sort of familiar with it, is outlawed, is banned in the Warhammer 40,000 universe because of previous problems. So humans and the machines are linked, essentially hardwired together. You will always have a human who's in control of the machines. But it's a symbiotic relationship. The nature of being hardwired into the machines is that it expands the pilot's awareness through the machine sensors, and it also feels pain through damage inflicted to the machine. So kind of a phantom pain, bit of a feedback loop. I don't know whether you would call it psychosomatic or if it would be something else, but if a Titan is wounded, the pilot will feel the pain. So they really are linked, the pilot and the machine. And the first book I've read, which sort of expands on the nature of the Knight Titans, which are the smallest Titans, it's the Horus Heresy novel called Mechanicum, and it's focusing on the machine priests of Mars. The nature of the machine priests is that they control most of the technology. They have their forges, and they produce most of the heavy machinery for the Imperium. But it's a very superstitious society. They don't necessarily understand the technology that they have. It's operated by rituals and routines, the anointing of holy oils and such like. So there's no real full understanding that goes on there. It's kind of a backwards-forwards sort of look at sci-fi. And the Knights are the main protectors of the Forge Worlds. So in Mechanicum, the main house that we follow is House Tyrannus, and I'm looking at basing my Knight Titan colour scheme off House Tyrannus, just because I quite like the background of it, and the fact that it's linked in with the Imperium. I think that there is a bit of a colour change though. When I was first reading the novel, they first describe the armour as a cobalt blue, which I think's awesome because I like blue. That's why I started playing ultramarines in the first place, because they're blue. And so at first I was thinking, well, maybe I'll go with this old school blue colour because it matches in and ties it all together. But post-Horus Heresy, it seems like the House Tyrannus colours change to red and white, and spoilers, because the house gets virtually destroyed, say for a couple of nights, and I guess the fluff is that they ally themselves more closely with the tech priests to fight the heresy, and they change their colour to closely match the red of the Mechanicum. So there's a bit of an attraction there to painting the red, just because it will stand out and be quite striking compared with the rest of my army. So I just have to decide if I'm going to go the red route or the blue route. But the red and white could look pretty good. I don't have a lot of practice painting with the red, so it's something that I don't know, might require a little bit of experimentation to see how it will turn out the best. I was hoping to get an airbrush, because I think this model would really suit an airbrush look, especially on the paints, on the armor plates. As I've said, the bulk skeleton is going to be more of your metallics and sort of machine look, whereas the armor plates are really going to be where the colours strike and stand out. So I'm going to have a play around with it once this is all together and see what I prefer. But couple of options there. As you can see, there's a lot of fine, very fine dust coming off here. So I'm going to keep this short, and I'm going to put my mask on again and make sure I clean all of this up so I don't inhale all of the resin dust, because I'm pretty sure that's not going to be good for me. But there we go, that was just a little brief explanation of some of the background for the model, and also what some of my plans are. So there we go, more progress reports later.